Hello, everybody. Welcome on the Lights on Data show. Today, we have the honor, the pleasure, the privilege of hosting Lori Silverman. And she's going to talk to us about monetizing data through collaborative informed decision-making. Welcome, Lori.
Thank you very much for having me.
The pleasure is all mine. For those that don't know you somehow, can you please tell us a little bit about yourself and your expertise?
The beginning of my career and the end of my career have to do with the same thing. So I feel like I've been bookended somewhere. At the beginning of my career, when I was in my 20s and my 30s, I was an organization development consultant, and we were working with companies to do exactly the same things we're trying to do today, which is how do we shift culture so that we can embed data into all the decisions that are being made inside of organizations. And we did that enterprise-wide very successfully. I'm a strategist, so I left that work and I went and I did some other things. Strategic thinking, strategic planning, wrote a couple of books in business storytelling. And then in 2015, as a result of a chapter in the book, Business Storytelling for Dummies, that we wrote on what do we do with data, I came back to the field and I did some research and I went, what is it that's going on? And what is it that I perceive that's missing? One of the core things that I saw was missing was that there was no methodology for decision-making. At the beginning of my career, we had methodologies. We'd have a 7-step methodology for problem solving, one for innovation, one for continual improvement, and one for standardization. Because if you don't standardize processes, the data only tells you about the variability and what people are doing. But here in 2015, and even today, you don't find methodologies to help people throughout an enterprise think about how to embed data into their day-to-day or strategic decisions. So that's what I've been focused on is that methodology and creating one with a colleague.
That's something that any organization needs to look into and start adopting.
One would hope so, but I think that there is a shift in mindset that has to take place before this can happen. And that is the industry right now is focused on data governance, data strategy, data quality, data cleansing, data warehousing, data marketplaces. And I'm saying, whoa, no, you're focused on the beginning piece. That doesn't get you value. Value is when we actually use the data, consume it. And I've had a lot of pushback on that term, but you can consume data as you're going through this process. And we have to start focusing on the decision itself. And what's the value of the decision? But that mindset shift, I'm starting to think is as big as the one where we had to make, where we said, hey, you know what? The solar system doesn't revolve around the Earth, it revolves around the sun. And so I think it's going to take us a really long time to get over here. But I've chosen to stay in this space and to promote this work.
Well, and thank you for doing that. It's very interesting because I feel that we're shifting between two opposites, polar opposites. One is, no, we don't care about data at all. It's just the business and the old way, traditional way of doing things, versus, oh, it's all about the data and we're not even focusing on the business part. We're not aligning our data strategy with the business strategy, and that creates an issue.
Exactly. I've worked across 25 different industries with C-suite leaders over my career, and they're all focused on business value, hands down. Necessarily want to talk about data. They just want to talk about how can I grow my business? How can you cut my costs? How can you increase my revenues? How can we bring a new product line or a new service to market? Or what if we need to merge with another organization? Those are the things that they're concerned about. And so, of course, I think that we're in that dilemma. But the challenge is this, and that is when you have two polar opposites, there's always a third piece. There's always a third piece that joins them together. And so these two are two truths. But how do we learn to bring them together into a consonant whole? And that's what I hope what we've done with our methodology on decision making that we call making smarter decisions with data, is that we've taken these two dichotomies and said we need to bring them together because both are important. We can't ignore the data, because I'm not saying that. We also can't ignore the business value that leaders are looking for inside their organizations. And that's where the monetization piece comes.
Right. A colleague of mine said, maybe in terms of of calling it data driven, let's call it data informed.
Yes, absolutely. It is data informed. I talk about this in a paper I wrote on monetizing data through collaborative informed decision making. And the reason for that is that a couple things. One is that intuition is a form of data. We cannot ignore that. If we ignore it, what we're saying to people is that your experience doesn't matter at all. So to do work, we'll just give it to machines. And second, if you look at the tens of thousands of decisions that are made in organizations every day, a majority of those are and will continue to be made by humans. And emotions are needed for decisions to be made. If the emotional part of the brain is damaged in any way, shape, or form, people will stay in a pro or con or this or that or alternative sharing perspective. They'll never, ever make a decision. And yet what we're doing is we're saying, oh, we got to make it objective. We got to get the emotions out. And the answer is no, don't do that. You still need them. And so again, in the decision-making framework that we've created, it truly is about data informed. How do we bring these pieces together? And then how do we deal with unknown and unknowable data?
So let's talk a little bit about this collaborative data informed decision.
Karen Dietz and I spent several years not only looking at the methodologies that I created earlier in my career, but also looking at the data wisdom continuum and saying, what could be some steps that people could go through that are comprehensive enough that no matter who you were in the organization, even without knowing anything about data, that you could use easily. And so we created this method that we call SMARTER. The first step of SMARTER, which is setting the context, for us, is the most important step in the entire process and is often ignored. This has to do with business value. Now, it's more than just saying what's the decision that needs to be made or what's the problem you're trying to solve, and also stating it in actionable form. Because if you state it as a knowledge question, all you're going to get is a knowledge insight. That's not going to lead you to action. Really have to say, how do I make this question very actionable so that we can take action at the end of the process based on it? But we also have to think about some of the things related to change. What's the pain and urgency to even get an answer to this decision? Who cares about this? Who are the core stakeholders around it? What'll be done with the results? And then for me, has a decision already been made? Because if a decision's already been made, don't go through the process. You're just wasting your time. What I say to people is just go implement the decision. If it's not going to kill anybody or lose hundreds of millions of dollars or whatever your currency is, go try it. Go try it. And if it works, great. And if it doesn't, then reverse your decision and try something new. Maybe then you'll listen to the methodology or the process itself. But without doing this step, you cannot have an insight, a meaningful insight. You'll get interesting insights. Yeah. Oh yeah, that's really interesting. But you won't get, oh my gosh, this is what we need to do different. Now let's take action on it. So after setting the context, then we go into things that most people in the data analytics arena know very well. Managing the data, which is collecting and organizing the data, and do we have the right data? Assuring confidence is the third step or the third stage. We tweak this a bit because it's not just about data quality. What I've learned over my lifetime is that also in terms of influence has to do with, do we trust all the people whose hands are on this decision-making process? Because if there's one person in it I don't trust, I'm not going to trust the outcome. So you have to think about the people portion of this as well. And then the R stands for reveal insights. We believe that when you're looking at a decision, that three potential insights can emerge. You could get knowledge insights, but as I said earlier, they're not actionable. What we hope that you get are current state insights, which are things you can do today based on the decision. And then what we also hope that you might get, and you might want to hold off to the side, are future state insights, which are potential innovations. And you don't want to ignore those. So we look at, with groups of people, what are those three pieces when you get to the insights portion? And that is where I want to just make a distinction here. That's where data visualization can be extremely helpful, which is at bringing out or revealing the insights. The reason I say this is that the T of SMARTER is taking a stand or actually making the decision, making the most important decision now. And I think where I see a flaw in the analytics community is that there's a belief that you can storify data. And you can use data visualization to communicate it. And the answer to that is don't do it. The human brain hates data. That's the simplest way of talking about it. You want to use a business narrative story, words, and keep data out of it. The data visualizations reveal the insights, but they're not the story.
Yeah.
Everybody's focused on that right now. I used to challenge that a lot. I don't so much because the pressure is so great from technology companies to stay here. But I'm telling you, if you really want to influence people, then you need to use narrative story. This is a whole brain influence approach. And when you move away from the data and you figure out the stories to tell, oh my gosh. And then we can move into the E, which is execute the decision, and then R, which is relay the results from the execution. So I think that we've got some challenges still in the middle of this process, which is why I like to look at all of decision making. Because again, if you don't have the right question, you're not going to get the meaningful insights. And then if you've got the meaningful insights and you don't communicate them correctly, you're not going to get to an action.
Yeah, no, definitely. As a fun fact, we had these two amazing guests, the founders of this company called Narrative Science. It doesn't exist anymore. I think they got bought out by a big company. I forgot which one. I hope their technology will continue to be, but they were basically trying to convert all that data visualization and all the raw data into a narrative. You need that narrative to understand a little bit better, to hit you the right place.
Well, exactly. The challenge is that this is the difference that we don't talk about in the analytics community between sense making and meaning making. Mm-hmm. When people make sense of something and they look at data, they go, oh, that's interesting. Mm-hmm. When people make meaning, which is what they get out of a story, they go, oh, now I know what you want me to do. Now I get it. Oh, wow. Now what do we do? And that takes you into progress and action. This just gets you stuck. And that's where we are. And that's why I think sometimes we're not making progress. We have great studies that are taking place in the analytics community, but we're just not getting this next leap to action.
Yeah. All right. So why should people care about this?
Okay. Questions that I ask CEOs all the time, because I get the opportunity to speak at Vistage events and other places where I get groups of CEOs. And what I say to them related to this methodology when I introduce it is, what's the cost in your organization of making the wrong decision? What's the cost of not making a decision at all? Saying, here's what we need. We know we need to take care of this, but we delay and delay and delay, and then it never gets done and it moves on to the next group of people. And what's the cost of that? Or what's the cost of taking too long to make a decision? Or what's the cost of making the right decision and then not fully implementing it or not implementing it at all? And that's when their ears perk up. Their ears don't perk up when it comes to the data, but when it's like, oh, yeah, because I can say to them, tell me about decisions that have been made in the past that were wrong. And they have a litany of those. What was the cost of each of those to your business? And how long did it take you to make those? And if you had even made one of those correctly, what would the impact have been on the bottom line? That's when they start to say, you know what? We need to start thinking about a more comprehensive or rigorous approach to decision making. Because like I said, right now, we don't give that to people, right? We say, oh, let's teach them data. Let's teach them statistics. Let's teach them visualization, but we don't teach them how to think. Mm-hmm. So for me, it's how do we teach people how to think? New Vantage Partners in their last report that came out in early 2021 said this. They said that chief data officers need to be focused on decision making, and they need to find people in the organization who can bring in methodologies to do this. And I'm right with them.
Well said. What are your top tips, best practices?
First of all, I think the thing that bothers me a little bit in the analytics community is that we've compartmentalized data analytics. We just do it in projects. And we have to start looking at bringing this into the work of all employees inside of an organization. If you think about decision making, that's where they can attach to. And if you give them a methodology like this, every single business process they touch day in and day out has key decisions that need to be made. They can use methodologies like this, even if they're just going through the first step of the process to get clear on the decision they're trying to make. So I think we need to switch our mindsets from, why are we continuing to compartmentalize and why are we not using this throughout an enterprise? Second, you're going to need a methodology for decision making. You're welcome to use Smarter, or if you can want to create your own methodology, feel free to do. But I think for us, what we've done is we've incorporated so many things that other methodologies like the scientific method don't have. Things like unknown and unknowable data, things like intuition, like human emotions, the meaning-making piece that I talked with you about, and so on. Those are all critical items that have to get inserted into the process. It's not just data in a tangible format that we need to look at. Then finally, bringing this methodology to your business leaders, because if you can help them with even one strategic decision in their regular day-to-day work as a leader, that will gain you a lot of ground inside of your enterprise. But what we're trying to do is, for me, it's not about data literacy. It's about how do we create more intelligent organizations? And that's a very different conversation.
From your experience, Lori, have you seen a company that is doing this the right way?
Today? No, not today. No. I can tell you about companies in the past that have done this, not today. And I think that there are a variety of reasons for this, sadly. One which has to do with the focus on data, which is what technology companies are bringing forth. A few years ago, talked to over 50 leaders of technology companies, and I brought this methodology to them and I said, what do you think of it? And they all said, this is brilliant. Oh my gosh, this is great. But I can't build it into technology, so therefore it's worthless to me. So I'm not going to bring it to my clients. And that was an eye-opener for me, because for some reason, well, I can't say for some reason, I know everybody wants to make a buck, and that's where their focus is. But they see the benefit of teaching people a way of thinking that will get results from the data itself. So I don't know when we are going to be ready to step back and say, we need to embrace something different. It may be, as it is in almost all fields, as it was when I was doing this work early on in my career, because early in my career, other companies had statisticians just teaching 3 and 4 weeks of what we now call data analytics, and it wasn't working. But when people like me were brought into organizations and we focused on the cultural aspect of this, and we focused on decision-making and better decisions as the outcome, those companies gained traction and a lot of success. But what had to happen first was a lot of failures, a ton of failures. I don't think we have a lot of failures yet. I don't think we have enough pain nor enough urgency to make a change. That's the sad part of what I'm bringing forward, because I do believe that the value of what I'm sharing with you, that I've seen when I teach workshops or give keynotes across the world to people who are using these methodologies as best as they can within what they control in their organizations, is they get huge successes. They just can't use it organization-wide.
Hopefully not yet.
Not yet. Yes, correct. I love that, because I always say that to people too. There's always the yet at the end of it.
So what are your recommendations for those that want to learn a little bit more about collaborative data-informed decision-making?
First of all, you need to learn about how the brain works. There's 2 ways that I have that you can do this. And there's lots of books on brain research right now. One is, a couple of years ago, Karen Dietz and I did a LinkedIn Live show together on all of the research that we are aware of. It's on my Level Up with Lori LinkedIn Live channel. It's episode 8. I also took this research and for the very first time put it into an article that I did for a Cutter Consortium's Amplify magazine called The Increasingly Vital Role of Business Storytelling and Leadership. That's on the front page of my LinkedIn profile where people can grab that. Second is, Karen and I wrote Business Storytelling for Dummies back in 2013. The information in it, other than chapter 8, because that's the work that we've evolved over time, that's on what do we do with data. The content in that book is timeless in terms of how do you create narrative stories. So I'd encourage people to see that. And then also what you talked about with narrative science. Also for Cutter, I wrote an article on this methodology called Monetizing Data Through Collaborative Informed Decision-Making. That article is also on my LinkedIn homepage, and there's a couple of posts about it. And then finally, start looking into the field of decision intelligence. Lori Ann Pratt has been really the person to bring this forward. Get a hold of her first book. I know she's writing a second book. But the first book, I think, starts to give more of an overview of why it is that we want to create more intelligent organizations. But just be careful here. And my carefulness is that the technology arena has hijacked this term, and they're starting to see that decision intelligence is only the use of technology to help companies become more intelligent. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about making each and every one of us more intelligent so that the organization and the work that it does becomes smarter, faster, better over time.
Thank you. Thank you so
You're
much,
welcome.
Lori, for being here today and shedding light on this important topic. And I do encourage everybody to follow Lori Silverman on LinkedIn for a lot more content. Lori, I know you're going to be taking a break and starting in 2023, but we do hope that you'll be back and still be engaged with the data community.
Absolutely. I'm around till the end of 2023 is what I tell people. So grab me now. But I am. I'm starting to take more and more time off to explore some other possibilities within my life. Thank you for acknowledging that.
Thanks so much, Lori.
You're welcome.